What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the neighborhood. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much as well. On this episode, I have a bone to pick with the capital G gamers. I want to talk about how video game genres are stupid and they've gotten out of hand.
Welcome to the podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
From Wikipedia, a video game genre is an informal classification of a video game based on how it is played rather than visual or narrative elements. This is independent of setting, unlike works of fiction that are expressed through other media such as films or books. For example, a shooter game is still a shooter game, regardless of where or when it takes place. A specific game genre is open to subjective interpretation. An individual game may belong to several genres at once. So before I go down the explanation of how this topic came to be, Dylan, our good friend, founder of the show, is back. How's it going?
Better than it was. Feeling much better.
That's good. Yeah. I do not have what you had, but you can hear that I now have something. So there just seems to be something going on right now. We're glad to have you back. Glad you're feeling better. Aubrey is also back here. Aubrey, thanks for holding down the fort while Dylan was out. How's it going?
It is going well. Unlike you two losers, I haven't been sick at all.
That sounds like famous last words.
Yeah, I was going to say, way to just tempt fate there.
I'm really just screwing myself right now.
Yeah. Any big naps recently?
No, I'm trying to be better about not taking naps, so I actually go to sleep at a decent hour at night.
That's overrated.
I know. I've been working a lot, and, it's a lot nicer when you can leave work at, 4. I'm very lucky to have, work where I don't have to be in at a specific time. So if I'm not good about getting there early, it can be tricky to get out early, and with a lot of the moving stuff going on, as much afternoon and evening time as I can have is good. So that has translated to out of bed and out the door by 6:45 these past few days.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah. We're doing a little cruise through different energy drinks right now. Making an adventure by trying some different ones.
Yeah, when I worked my last job, I would wake up at 5:15. My first alarm maybe went off at 4:45, and then I'd snooze it for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was so that I could get off work early on Fridays. I'd go in super early, work long days, and then on Friday I could be off super early. Now that I work from home, I have a much more kind of healthy schedule, I feel like. And recently my wife and I have been getting up and trying to exercise, do some working out before work starts. Then I go to work at 7, which considering I don't have to drive 30 minutes is a lot, more doable. So I definitely don't miss
before.
Yeah, exactly. I don't miss those super early morning alarms. It's kind of been spoiling me recently.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not talking about good things on this episode. We're getting mad. We're getting frustrated here with video game.
You're getting mad.
Okay, don't act like we didn't do a whole episode where you complained about the Diablo community, Dylan.
That's true. They suck though. So
okay, and what we're talking about now. Let me give a little history here, because the inception of this topic came about because Dylan and I, during Dark Souls month, we did a podcast episode and we did a YouTube video around the idea of ranking From Software's Souls style games. So The reason we framed it like that was because From Software has Armored Core, they have Kingsfield, they have a lot of games outside of the most popular franchises that they're known for, being Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and then Sekiro kind of gets lumped in there. Demon Souls, especially now with the remake, is a bit more relevant as well. And those are like their Souls games. And that's like when people talk about FromSoft, especially before this most recent Armored Core came out and kind of brought that franchise back from like obscurity, FromSoft equaled Dark Souls. So we made a YouTube video where we ranked all of the Souls-style video games that FromSoft had made. And in the title of that video, we called it FromSoft's Souls-like games. And I would say at least 50% of the comments had to be some variation of, well, actually, you can't call these Souls-likes because they are the Souls games. Like, these are...
Oh, they're not like the Souls games. They are the Souls games.
Exactly. These are not likes. This is the original. And so while I can understand the like the kind of viewpoint that is coming from, it kind of just it triggered this idea in the back of my mind, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to do it, if I wanted to try to do like a more topic-based YouTube video at the time. Ultimately ended up being what you're hearing now, a podcast episode of just like video game genre definitions have kind of gotten out of hand. And I say that meaning that, I say that meaning like a bunch of different angles. So like one is we're naming genres after games like Souls, like roguelikes, like Metroidvanias. We're getting super like niche and nitpicky in some areas about what that means. Like roguelite versus roguelike is an actual debate people will have on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And also at this point, it's just gotten so convoluted that if I were to try to explain to a non-gamer friend, now we all have a mutual friend that just recently bought an Xbox Series S, and the kind of questions that he will be asking, like that he was asking Dylan and I over the weekend about like different games and why he was getting Xbox points on his Xbox app, like that kind of surface level gamer, these genre definitions make no sense.
Yeah.
So there's just a whole bunch of different angles you can kind of come at this topic from, of being like, is this working? Is this the right way for us to be defining games? Is there a point to define games this like going down this deep niche wise? Like if we came up with a term for roguelike style games and it was much more general, couldn't we just stick with that? Why do we need a roguelike and a roguelite? And, you know, maybe they'll come up with another one that means something different. And so that was kind of just the idea that I had festering in my mind. And I threw together a document, and I threw together some different articles that I found and some Wikipedias talking about video game genres and things like that. And I pulled that one blurb that I read at the beginning of the episode, but I wanted to bring you guys on. I wanted to kind of just throw this topic out there, this idea, and just kind of see where the conversation went. Talking about this with both of you and getting your takes on the current state of video game genres. I guess the last kind of setting the stage thing that I'll mention is last year there was a big kerfuffle in the industry. I'm sure that most people that are just casual gamers have no idea what I'm talking about, but in the like fandom in the industry of video games, Dave the Diver was nominated for like best indie game, but it wasn't actually made by an independent developer. It just looked like an indie game because it was like pixel art and it was simple.
Yeah, well, and it was made by a very small developer, but it had a publisher or something.
It had like a big publisher. Yeah, it had big backing, from the big publisher. Whereas like Baldur's Gate 3 was an actual independent developer that made a AAA video game. So AAA style video game. Yeah. So it just seems like the genre definition waters are extremely muddy. And I figured we could pontificate about that for about an hour and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you were talking about like this, the Souls like, and that whole debate and everything, it reminded me of when they rebooted Fruits Basket, and I watched it with Joe. Okay, stay with me here.
This is a very niche.
I know it's kind of
example.
roundabout, but like Fruits Basket was like the original shoujo, like that series of like genre of following a female protagonist, slice of life, but there is something kind of deeper going on. And so it had like a lot of it was very trope heavy because it introduced those tropes.
Yeah.
So when I was, watching it with Joe, not that he's watched any shoujo anime, but I was like, hey, this is going to seem kind of tropey, but you got to understand, like, this is where the tropes come from. Like, this was published like originally like 15 years ago. And so I can understand the like, if someone were to be ranking a bunch and then like Fruits Basket's all tropey and they just like shove it in the corner without giving it like that moment of like it was on the leading edge of these and introduced these tropes, and all of these ones that made it an overplayed trope were attempting to imitate this one. I could see that level of like kind of pedantic obnoxiousness about like, actually Fruits Basket was first. But on the other hand, like,
Yeah.
that's
But like
pedantic as hell and annoying.
in your analogy, what we were doing is ranking the Fruits Baskets like seasons or episodes. Like we were staying in that original idea and ranking those things.
Yeah. Well, and I think to me, like you kind of hit the nail on the head, Aubrey, where it's like there's a certain point where it's useful, like genres and that sort of thing. But then there comes a point where it's almost as if some of these capital G gamers are like intentionally misunderstanding you. Like, because they know,
for sure.
Like everyone who looked at that video knew that we were ranking the From Software games like that. Like you can read that title and understand that just because of context clues. And so people get in there and then they're like, well, actually, and there's I'm sure points where it's like, okay, there are people that, that's how they get their kicks is, correcting somebody on the internet points. Or whatever, But, it's one of those things where if we're talking about if we're talking about Mass Effect, I guess, for example, and somebody calls it a third-person shooter and somebody calls it an RPG, like, I still understand kind of what they're talking about. Like, I'm understanding, like, okay, the gameplay is going to be like a third-person shooter. Oh, it's an RPG? Okay, I understand what that entails.
Yeah, and mechanic versus, like, story delivery.
Exactly, and neither of those people would be wrong, but also it's useful in, like, a quick, like, hey, what kind of games do you like sort of way in my mind, but it's not useful once you start drilling down much further than that, if that makes sense.
Well, most definitely. Yeah.
Souls-likes, big genre. I personally tend to like the From Software ones. I haven't played a ton of others, but also most of the ones that I've semi-tried that have been 2D, I have not vibed with. And that's probably mostly because they're also platformers, and I just don't vibe with platformers in general. So saying like, oh, it's a Souls-like, well, is it a 3D like action adventure kind of RPG Souls-like type of thing? Makes more sense to me.
Well, I think that's one of the things like kind of at the root of my frustration with video game genres is I think it's silly for us to be naming genres after games. So if I released a review on my Parents Guide to Gaming channel for Metroid Dread, and in that review I talked about how this game is a Metroidvania, and one of the comments I got, and it was a good comment giving me constructive criticism and feedback, and they talked about how, like, if you're talking to the average parent about games that they could get for their kid, they don't know what a Metroidvania is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that's
and it
beyond their scope.
Yeah, it got me thinking, like, is that even actually a helpful definition or categorization for a genre if we're just naming it like that one's two styles of games combined? But unless you know what those games are, that doesn't tell you that, oh, it's probably going to be 2D You're going left to right. You're looking for like secrets in the environment. You're picking up upgrades as you progress that will allow you to go to new areas. And the idea is that you explore and you fight bosses and enemies. And the more you explore, the more you're rewarded and the more you can progress. And then eventually you will have the full map and you'll be able to beat the game. Like nothing in Metroidvania explains that gameplay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
But it can be like a helpful shorthand for people in the know. I like thinking of like medical terminology and stuff, but also even to like other medical professionals, I have to explain certain shorthand that I use because they don't use it in their field. So yeah, I get it.
Well, and it's one of those things where it's like once somebody understands what a Metroidvania is and they're like, oh, I like this, then knowing the term Metroidvania could help them find other games that they like. But I think you're right when the main, like if you get on Steam and you look at like the tags, if you look at the descriptions of the games, they will describe themselves as like a Souls-like or a Metroidvania or something like that. And so it's like, I think a lot of people underestimate. I think gamers in general tend to think that all people who play video games have the same level of knowledge. And it's like, no, most people who play video games, like you are in the top 10%. You probably, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in the vast minority of people who play video games to know this kind of terminology, you know?
Yeah, like maximum passion, but definitely minority as far as knowledge. Exactly. My thing is, you could have named it anything, and you went with Metroidvania. It's like the actual technical, I think, definition or genre of Souls-likes is action RPG.
Yeah,
which still is pretty vague, but at least tells me, okay, I'm going to be doing action, probably, fighting. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be RPG elements where I'm like upgrading my character and getting stronger and making decisions and whatever. And so like even that is much more descriptive than Souls-like.
Yeah. Again, with the no context like Metroidvania or Souls-like, things that define like action RPGs, like, or third person shooter RPG is like, I'm going to be viewing my character in the third person, primarily using guns for combat, and it's a role-playing game versus roguelite, which like roguelite, Souls-like, Metroidvania, those are all named after the original game that did the thing. Mm-hmm. But then on the flip side, so like we've kind of honed in on genres that are named after specific games, but on the flip side, it's like, there are action games, there are action adventure games, there are adventure games, so like even the generic kind of standard genres that video game categorization uses are still, they overlap a ton and don't actually really describe. And I know it's tough because a lot of games borrow ideas from other games, like Assassin's Creed used to be kind of like a stealth open world. Well, Prince of Persia, which was much more like linear and going through levels and stuff, and then Assassin's Creed was like the open world stealth assassination kind of game, and then now Assassin's Creed could be considered like an open world RPG with stealth elements, and so things are very fluid. In video games, and a lot of video games will see like, oh, that thing that game is doing is really cool. Like The Witcher introduced these cool dialogue options. Let's put that in our Assassin's Creed game. And so it's like things are always kind of changing, and games are borrowing ideas from other games. And so it is. I understand and appreciate and respect that it is difficult to kind of categorize. There's no clean way to like lump games into specific boxes. I just think that there might be some better alternatives versus what we're doing, and I also think that like just the gaming community, like the top 10% that we're talking about,
takes these descriptions a little too seriously.
Yeah.
Well, and like, I understand the urge to like categorize things as like humans. That is something that like we tend to do.
Yeah.
And like pattern recognition is a big thing. So like we get it.
Behold a man.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think the interactive nature of video games makes it much more difficult
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like if you're going to see a movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier in general to like throw those kind of into a genre, I would imagine. But I don't think this problem is like unique to video games. Like if Andrew and I both listen to a lot of metal music. If you look,
if we had a metal podcast, we could just transplant this topic right onto
Basically.
that, because
like you
the
can
metal
find
community is just as butthurt about genre definitions.
They're like, actually, this isn't black metal. This is doom metal.
Like metalcore, you loser.
Yeah. So it's not unique. But again, it is those, like sort of pretentious gatekeepy kind of fans that'll throw that kind of thing in there. And I get it from like a marketing standpoint where you have 2 sentences to try to capture your target audience. And so you are telling them this is a Souls-like, because people who like Souls games, that's all they need to see to check it out, But at the same time, I do think it is like I said, the interactive nature of the game, like Lies of P classified as a Souls-like, Mortal Shell, what's the French Revolution robot one?
Steel Rising.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different games that are all classified as Souls-likes, but there's things about all of those games that are different and make them unique, and that's not captured by like the Souls-like thing. And so it is like there is a lot more nuance the more that you drill down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get the easy shorthand, but also, like you said, every year I watch the Game Awards, I'm always like, I don't understand why there is an action and an action adventure category. I don't understand what the difference is. It kind of feels like they just arbitrarily placed games in both of these. So,
and then they put Sifu in the fighting game category.
Yeah.
And they just make a mockery of it anyways.
Of
exactly.
the whole thing. Yeah, you were thinking about like music and movies, and I was thinking about books, which are running into a similar thing right now with like book talk. And especially with the popularization of like romantasy novels, of like the A Court of Thorns and Roses and like all of those kind of like, fairy porn. And how there's just like, half of the books that, get pushed and promoted on there, like it's a romantasy, it's a romantasy, it's a romantasy. But then also like with Bridgerton getting really popular and being a TV adaptation of a like classic bodice ripper romance novel, there's a lot of people being like, don't worry, they'll have a happily ever after because it's a romance novel, and that's the point of a romance novel, is it's wish fulfillment. It's gonna have the happily ever after. But then you get people who try and like riff on the genre and change it up, and then they're like, no, it's not romance because they didn't have a happily ever after. Versus video games, books can take a long time to read, but a video game is an immersive experience that you interact with story, with mechanics, with visuals, with audio. Like there's so many different ways that you can hop genres or blend or twist or riff or make it so different that like it's really reductive actually to try and like throw it in a box like a Souls-like.
Well, and just thinking about like, especially RPGs, I think fall into this category, but there are so many different ways to play. And like,
well, yeah,
the
RPGs
way that I
has
play
become such a big ballooning genre that, like, I would say if I said JRPG, you know exactly what I'm talking about because they have not changed. But like everything is an RPG these days.
Yeah, I was gonna say they throw in like some sort of skill tree and some sort of level up your stats sort of thing. But I'm thinking like Skyrim. I always end up gravitating towards Stealth Archer, and so I play Skyrim a whole lot more like a stealth RPG. When you could just run in there like a barbarian with a big axe or something, or, Hitman is another that I think of. I think Hitman is technically classified as like a simulation game or a strategy game or something. But
yeah, like I would say stealth sim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like you technically could play it more like a third-person shooter, you know.
You just get a bad score.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be me playing that.
You wouldn't be very you wouldn't get a good rating at the end of the mission. They'd be like, yeah, you kind of just killed everybody. But if no one's left to have seen you, like, good job, I guess.
It is interesting how different a category can be, because like I think of, there are visual novels, and when you hear visual novel, you know exactly what kind of game you're getting. Like the story, the topic could be different, whatever, but like you know what kind of game that is. There are walking simulators, again, probably have a good idea of what you're getting into. There are first person shooters. You have a pretty solid idea of what that game is going to play like. But then you get into like stealth action, or God forbid RPG. RPG has been so overused, and things just get so out of control in that one genre, and I think that might be why people try to drill down.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Like if you say action RPG, it's like, okay, so this is not a turn-based RPG. Like I'm going to be actively in control of my character and doing the action versus like managing it by choosing my moves and stuff. But at a certain point, it's like, when have we gone too far? And also, couldn't we have come up with a better description or a better descriptor for this type of game rather than roguelike? Like, couldn't it be like cyclical? I don't know. Like there's got to be something that, like, if you hear the term, you're like, oh, I kind of understand what this game is structured like. I'm going to play these same things over and over and slowly get stronger versus
pushing
roguelike.
That boulder up the hill.
Yeah, when you hear roguelike, it's like, I don't know what rogue is. So what is this like?
Yeah, well, and that's this. I'm going to use my analogy that makes sense to neither of you now. I play a lot of Magic the Gathering. There are so many mechanics and cards in Magic the Gathering that are referred to like what they do by a term. So, for example, there are a lot of cards that will mill somebody.
I know what that means.
Yeah, so it's like you're making people discard their cards.
They made mill a viable option in Marvel Snap, and I hate it.
Okay, yeah. Well, and so like, and it's even transcended into other games like Marvel Snap and Hearthstone, like milling people. But what it comes from is like way back in like the early 90s when Magic was just starting. They printed a card called Mill Stone that like took the two top cards off your deck and put them in your graveyard. And so like that is why card games like Marvel Snap have mill in them. And most people don't know where it comes from because like they just know what it does now.
Right.
And so it reminds me of that kind of thing where it's like, okay, this is something that has became kind of shorthand for this. And so like I understand roguelike, but at this, like, because it is an easier way to explain what the game is if you're in the know than a game where you go on like a run and like once you die, you go back to the start and level up and like get a little bit further in the run or blah, blah. Like it, I get it because trying to explain exactly what it is, it would be so complicated that just saying roguelike is like two syllables. But at the same time, I 100% agree that it's like, okay, that makes sense to like the 10% of people. Now, granted, I don't know how many people are playing a roguelike that aren't capital G gamers. Hades was probably the main one.
Yeah, Hades is definitely kind of, but it happens in every genre. I mean, like Hades made roguelikes a much more mainstream genre. The Souls games, like they kind of created that genre, or at least made it.
It was genre defining at the very least.
Exactly. Yeah. And so now, like with Elden Ring, Souls-likes is a very prominent mainstream genre. Metroidvanias, you have Hollow Knight, you have the Metroid games. Like there are just enough games putting Metroidvania into the spotlight that it's like you will have new gamers coming in that have to essentially do homework to figure out, or they just accept, like they hear someone tell them, oh, a Metroidvania means you do this, this, and this, and then they just carry on with the lingo, which is what most people do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it just seems like the seriousness at which people defend these terms,
Yeah.
I think like that is what triggered this
Yeah.
topic in my mind, but also going like stepping from that and kind of expanding the idea. It's like, well, how could we do better? Like I guess mostly for bringing outside people in and like having them be able to grasp the idea of some of these games easier or without having that friend to explain it to them. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but it's like, is there a better system? Because at this point, and I think it especially kind of came to the limelight or the forefront with the whole indie conversation last year, is like, well, now we're using a word that means one thing,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and we're applying it to something like that doesn't fit that meaning whatsoever. We're saying this is an independent video game when it was not independently developed. And this over
Yeah.
here is like a mainstream AAA video game that was independently developed. And so now we're just like, we took this word that means one thing, but in our community and in our world, what it actually means is cute little pixel game that you can play on your Switch when you're like relaxing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have been playing Dave the Diver on my Switch, and it is fantastic. So
Yeah, I'm not trying to like slander Dave the Diver. It was just the game that kind of brought this to the forefront.
yeah.
Well, and it's a normal thing that happens with language, and you see it in every industry. And it's when it happens in real life, you're not like socially rewarded for like, oh, can you help me get this patient up with the Hoyer lift? Why is it called a Hoyer lift? Like, you mean the mechanical lift? That's not a Hoyer brand Hoyer lift. And it's like, okay, well, they still need to get out of bed. So like, why
Yeah.
are we having this conversation kind of a thing?
Yeah.
And then there's also, in terms of like that indie thing specifically, it is kind of an issue with kind of leaders in the community in a way, because it is so like, I don't know, capitalistically like clickbaity kind of, you know, trying to get clicks, trying to get downloads, trying to get you to buy, get you to engage, get you to watch, you know, the live stream of the video game awards. There's not maybe, I don't know, care and thought being put into it. And again, so much of it happens online that you don't have to like actually look the person in the face when you like give this really ridiculous pedantic delivery and have them go, yes, good job, you're correct, you win nothing for this. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's a lot harder to take in real life versus, you know, over a comment section.
Yeah. Like if you asked your friend for a Kleenex and they were like, well, technically this is a great value brand nasal tissue, you would probably stop being friends with that person. But
Yeah, that was a constant occurrence.
to answer the question of what are some other things that come to mind that like are different ways that we could do this, to me, I think the thing that I look at more is like, if I enjoy a game, I will get on the like Xbox store or whatever, Steam store, and they'll usually have a like also recommended other people who enjoyed this game also played these games sort of thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And to me, that's much more useful because like we were talking about RPGs earlier. It's like, okay, if I enjoyed Baldur's Gate, which is an RPG, that doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy Skyrim, because that is a very different RPG.
Right.
Like they are both technically RPGs, but if I get on like the Xbox recommended games, they're also going to be on there saying like Divinity Original Sin. They're also going to be on there saying Pathfinder Kingmaker. They're also going to be saying like Solastra or whatever it is. And so like other CRPGs, which to me, like even if I was unfamiliar with the term CRPG, if I got on there and looked at those, and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is like a very similar style of game. So like that's something that comes to mind. The other thing that I was thinking of was I don't know how to describe it other than like the vibe. I am a big fan of like Lovecraftian and cosmic horror. So I will pretty much play any game regardless of genre that does that.
It's that story setting.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like, well, what did you like about, what I like about Bloodborne a lot, but one of the biggest things was the Lovecraftian cosmic horror elements to it. And so it's like oh, if that's all you're looking for, here are other games that like also have cosmic horror elements to them,
Yeah.
Those were the two things that kind of came to my mind.
Yeah, which can help when finding, more of what you like, or even recommending to other people. I don't know. Like I'm good at figuring out where problems come from. I'm not super great at solving them. So obviously this problem came from marketing. Like, to be able to market your game, you have to be able to like put it in a soundbite or a clip or whatever.
Yeah.
In terms of your specific problem of people being pedantic online about it, one, I don't think it's ever going to be solved. But two, I'll do my part in saying, hey, people, maybe we just chill out.
I mean, they're giving us good content for the podcast, so,
Yeah, or if you're going to be like that, like engage in a genuine conversation. Like, what was your actual problem with calling it a Souls-like? It was, because you didn't want the Dark Souls games to be compared to later games in the genre that maybe improved on it. And so you have a tender spot towards these Souls-like games. And so you don't want them ranking low because Bloodborne did X, Y, and Z better. And so it got ranked higher. And you're mad because, well, they invented it. They should get preferential treatment because they didn't have the opportunity to take all of these things and have like a bouncing off point. Say that. Don't say, you can't call it a Souls-like because it is a Souls game. Like, articulate your argument a little better. Use more than 140 characters. This is YouTube, not Twitter. Like,
I mean, it's the same people that are posting on Twitter that are commenting on YouTube for the most part. So
I'm also fully aware that, I've eaten the mushroom in Alice in Wonderland and like, this will never happen. Like, this is pie in the sky. I'm dreaming. Yeah. But,
Well, I don't want to be discrediting or unfair to some of, like, we do get some good comments on our videos on Friendly Neighborhood Gamers site and on my side. Like, there are people that genuinely want to just share their opinion or engage in a conversation or ask questions. And so I don't want to like ignore or downplay those people because I appreciate those. And I think that is a cool product of putting content on the internet. It is just kind of like that particular brand of gamer that wants to argue about the like specifics of niche genre definitions.
Yeah, it's more so the ones that aren't there to have like a good or productive conversation. They are just there to,
it's just the one-upmanship.
Yeah, to be hypercritical and also not engage with it in good faith. Because like, if there is legitimately somebody who commented on that video who clicked on a ranking of From Software Souls-likes, expecting that list to not have the Dark Souls and Demon Souls games on there, then I guess like, whoops, sorry. But like, I don't think those people exist. I think the people that are commenting like, whoa, Souls-like, these are the Souls games, I think they're just intentionally misunderstanding and not engaging with us in good faith. And so those like, that's I guess the people that I could just kind of look at and be like, you can fuck off. Like, I don't care about your opinion. Like, you are just not trying to, like, you only engage with things in a critical fashion because you can't engage with something that you actually like.
Yeah. So I think that would like be my solution would be to encourage people to engage openly with discussion with the goal of articulating an argument, being receptive to feedback, and like trying to start a dialogue, not just it makes me think of Facebook, honestly. Some of those like, if this then this, point made, straw man argument, I win. Like,
Yeah.
That's such a boomer Facebook thing to do. Come on.
Well, yeah, like I was going to say, what it gives me is like the people who, when somebody says, let me ask you a question, are like, I'm sorry, what? Do you mean
Yeah.
ask me a question? And I'm just like, that same person can fuck off because you understand, because of how language works, what that person was saying. And
Correct,
so that's kind of the place I'm at, where I'm just kind of like, you knew what we were saying. And if you didn't, again, I don't really believe those people exist, but maybe they are there. And for those people, it's like, okay, but also you do understand you don't have to correct people on the internet. Like that's not a, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
I mean, even the pedantic comments are engagement, which, throw it into the algorithm. So
exactly.
It's not the kind of comment we love to receive, but if you really feel, God's laid it on your heart to say this, you can say it, but
yeah, that is normally my response when we get like unhelpful comments, where I'm just kind of people will watch the whole video of like a review saying like, hey, is this game worth it or not? And then they'll just put like in the comments, no. And I always just kind of respond, thanks for the engagement.
Yeah.
Like cool.
Yeah. In terms of like Metroidvania and Souls-like and stuff, I could.
Yeah.
Like on the one hand, that's definitely inaccessible. And if you're like making a product like you are on your other project to educate people, that's something that, being conscious of is really helpful. But also, again, in a real world interaction or in an online interaction, it's like, well, what's a Metroidvania? It's like, well, let me briefly explain it to you because you've asked. And or you are on an electronic device commenting on a YouTube video right now. You could have typed that question in another place that would have given you the answer.
Based on some of our other YouTube videos, people are unable to Google things. That is something that I have learned.
I mean,
half
Google
of the comments,
YouTube, they're the same entity, right?
I was going to say half of the comments on the Hitman video that has like 20,000 views right now is like, hey, does this come with all 3 games? And it's like, that's literally the title. That's literally in the title of this video is that it's all 3 games. And also you can just Google it real quick and see.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. But so people can't Google. I do wonder though, if the shift to people purchasing things way more digitally has affected this as well. Like when you were getting things in a physical store like GameStop, I think it was much easier. Not that I want to shout out GameStop employees for being particularly helpful, because in general they aren't. But in general, they probably are the people correcting us about Souls-likes. But
you also had like the whole like jacket and cover on the game to look at and read about what the game was. And
well, and you could go in and be like, hey, I really liked this game. What other games do you have that are like that? And you could have a conversation with a GameStop employee or something like that about like, oh, well, what did you enjoy about this game? And then they could try to like take all of that information and direct you to something, versus now with digital purchasing being the primary way I think that most people buy video games, you don't have that conversation. And so I do, another thought that I have is like, okay, the developers at this point, like we've kind of talked about, like most video games are inspired by other video games or take elements from other video games. It'd almost be like, hey, we'll give the developers, like, hey, here are 5 games that we think that heavily inspired this game, or that we think are closest to this game, so that you are getting, that
for fans of Hades.
Yeah, for fans of Hades, check this game out, sort of thing. Or, the digital storefronts could do a little bit more maybe with curation, especially you, Nintendo.
When Nintendo's like, hey, you like Nintendo games? Guess what we got?
Yeah.
We got more Nintendo games.
Yeah. I mean, I think most of that is probably AI driven at this point, but like Spotify or Apple Music or something like that, where they actually have real people.
Terrible example, because every time I like try to go onto a recommended or like a curated, like, oh, here is our things we think you would
I'm
like
not talking about-
playlist. It's
yeah,
always
I'm not
like,
talking
God,
about the AI ones. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about like the ones
Like when
that
people
an
make
actual real
playlists.
human
Yeah.
puts together
I
a
was about to
playlist.
say, my Discover Weekly was insane last week.
Yeah, like the AI ones, I don't think are good. I don't think AI is doing. I think all it really is doing is just
It's just pulling genre tags.
yeah, basically. So I don't think it is useful. But if you like some of the ones that are actually curated by real people on Apple or on Spotify are useful. And so I don't know whether or not Xbox or Steam or whoever has like a, hey, this is, for fans of X game, check out these, that's actually curated and vetted by a real person. Or if it is mostly just pulling genre tags and AI driven.
I mean, like on my Xbox dashboard, there is like a category of games we think you might like based off of what you've been playing recently, what you've purchased, what's in your library. And
yeah,
most of the time, like a lot of the games in that list are in my wish list. Like they will have.
They're just pulling from your wish list then.
Yeah, exactly. They'll have like Prince of Persia or like the Dragon's Dogma or like, and sometimes they have games that is not in my wish list, but that I've played on another platform. Like they'll put Hades in there and I'm like, you're right. I did like Hades. You don't know that I've played that because I played it on Switch, but that's a good recommendation. And so I do think that some of those are helpful. I think like kind of my final question, my final idea for this topic before we kind of move into our closing thing for this episode is like, do we think that this system is okay and it's working and it's fine to either look it up on Google, find your local GameStop employee, or find your nerdy video game friend to be like, hey, I'm new to this. I don't understand all this terminology and I don't know what kind of I know what kind of games I like and am playing. Help me weed through this? Or do we think that the just like baseline definitions and genres in this space could be improved somehow?
I think, as with everything, there is way more nuance than a generalized genre is able to convey. So I think the best solution is something that probably involves like
some form of
conversation or research or something like that, because I do think, like I said, okay, you enjoyed this game. What did you enjoy about it? And now with that in mind, I can recommend these other things. Same with a movie. Okay, well, you liked Lord of the Rings. Well, what did you like about Lord of the Rings? Because that may depend on, which direction of, other fantasy. Like if you liked Lord of the Rings, it's pretty safe to say you like fantasy movies, but there are so many out there.
Right.
Are we going the like Labyrinth route, or are we going, the Game of Thrones route? Like which direction here are we going? And so I think we did it on this show. Did we do the video game personality test thing?
Yes, we've done that on this show.
Yeah. So like something like that, I feel like is useful because it helps you kind of get down to like, well, what do I enjoy about games? What am I looking for in a game? That's one of the questions we ask most of the people who come on to interview on this show is like, we all enjoy different things about games. What do you see in a video game that makes you gravitate towards it? And so I think, like I said, there's some nuance. I think if you play a game and you enjoy it, spending 5 minutes thinking about like, well, why did I enjoy this? What parts of it did I really enjoy? I think that helps you really drill down and find games that are going to be other ones that you enjoy way better than like a generalized, oh, I like first person shooters tag because I like Halo. I am not the biggest fan of Call of Duty, So
yeah.
I can't play Doom because it gives me motion sickness. So all of those.
Yeah, but
kind
that's
of
like
things.
more of a technical thing. Like you would play Doom if it didn't give you
Probably.
emotions. Like that game's right up your alley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I guess that's my answer is that I think some research, I don't think to get into a video game, you need to know anything. Like there were plenty of people when Animal Crossing came out that just went out, no knowledge of video games, bought a Switch, bought Animal Crossing, enjoyed Animal Crossing. And so it's like, okay, well, what did you like now, though, if you want to find something else to play? Well, what did you enjoy about Animal Crossing? And that'll help kind of guide you. Like, do you just like the cozy, chill atmosphere? Well, here are some other games that kind of fit in that. Did you like the sense of progression you were getting? Well, here are some other games that, might fit into that. Do you like the animals? Well, here's some other, so again, I think just saying, well, here's cozy games as a genre in general isn't necessarily going to help you. It's a start, but I think drilling down to well, what did I personally enjoy about this?
Right. So
you can help you a whole lot more.
Sure.
You can kind of use the terms that gamers have come up with to find a specific vibe or tone or I guess neighborhood of video games that you might enjoy, but then to drill down and find the things that truly speak to you is on you as a player.
Yeah. That, or, I don't think it's a bad thing to talk to someone else about especially
no, but that's still on you to be
let
me go talk to my friend because they might have some recommendations.
Yeah I'd love to see a more curated system in the stores or something like that is maybe a little bit better, a little bit more vetted, because if you hop on if you get Fortnite and you look at big popular games, if you look at their recommendations, it usually is just other big popular games. It's not
right.
necessarily something
you like
that's
Fortnite, you're going to love Roblox and Minecraft.
Yeah, it's just all of the
you're
other
11, you're going to
free-to-play games.
You're going to love these other games 11-year-olds love.
Where it's well, no, I really liked the third-person shooter
Battle Royale
part of it. It's it's not necessarily recommending those. So,
Aubrey, what do you think?
I think it runs a similar track to Dylan in that it is language that is evolving and developing, and it's always kind of been the case. And while specificity is always better when it's an option, I can understand the desire for shorthand as well. And ultimately, getting pedantic about shorthand is very, very silly. But on the other, not on the other hand, but another thing I thought of was the Dunning-Kruger effect, where when you're getting into a hobby and you think you've got a good grasp of what's going on, and then once you actually learn enough, you realize you didn't know anything, and then you feel like you know less than when you started because you just weren't aware of the scope of what it was. And we all grew up playing video games, and I'm always kind of a little bit shocked when I talk to a coworker and they've got no context at all for what I'm talking about. And I'm like, okay, well,
yep.
Okay, how do I convey the relevant information in a way that makes sense to you? And it's a fun little test of my bedside manner in terms of explaining a concept that they have no context for. So I can understand why there's a lot of lingo and terminology that is kind of inaccessible, but also ultimately the pedantry is wholly unnecessary and unhelpful and alienating. And so while it can be handy for those in the know to pass back and forth, if you run into somebody using it, incorrectly or whatever, don't be a dick about it.
Yeah.
I think it's fine to exist as it is, as long as people are chill.
Yeah. So the kind of takeaway I got from what you're saying is that we may have kind of a confusing and subpar industry standard for how we describe games, but let's not use that as an excuse to gatekeep. Let's explain and help people when they don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. And it's just something that exists in every industry.
Yeah.
And that kind of person is equally annoying, regardless of, if they're a reader or a movie buff or, a sculptor or whatever.
It's the people who are Star Wars isn't sci-fi, idiot.
Yeah, it's actually science fantasy. Yeah. Well, it's one of those where it's there are perfectly reasonable ways for you to and polite ways for you to check and be hey, I also like science fantasy or whatever, without coming across like a dick.
Yeah.
But then if you are unintentionally coming across as a dick, maybe go to therapy and learn some social skills training. And if you're intentionally coming across
plugging
as a dick,
stuff, it's not the time for
then-
that. What are you?
then people are just not going to enjoy being around you. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole separate like conversation that probably isn't necessarily something we would have on this show about like the type of people who get deep into the gaming fandom and community may not have the best social skills. And, maybe Dylan is qualified to dissect why that is, but it's not really a conversation I feel like having on this show in particular. But there is something to consider when, this hobby brings in some people that maybe couldn't quite figure out social interactions in the real world as effectively as others. But
Yeah. Well, and one other caveat or, forgiveness for someone like that is it is an international community. And we are, very blessed that we are native speakers of the common like language of commerce and everything. And so there is also the possibility that they maybe can't articulate the argument better in English.
yes, that's something I thought of. There's also just people, like anytime I get a text from our mother, I think she's mad at me, and it's taken me like 10 years to adapt and realize that's just how she texts. So like
she just puts a period on the end of every sentence.
Well, and she always, like, for a person that talks so much in real life, she has like the shortest, most abrupt text messages. And so it's like there is definitely a barrier and a wall in like technology that sometimes you can be interpreting something that wasn't intended that way. But ultimately, like, I feel like at least 80% of the time I'm getting the intended like tone of what these people meant. So yeah, I do try to keep in mind the, maybe there's a language barrier. Maybe there is I don't understand how to effectively communicate through text or whatever barrier. But I do think that like there are very obvious groups of people in this community that are like, they're welcoming and they like want to bring people in and welcome them and be like
Monster Hunter fans.
Well, yeah. And I mean, there are people like that in the Souls community too. It's just, they're not usually in YouTube comments. So
yeah, that's true too.
I like what you said, Aubrey. You're kind of closing idea of like, even if this system that we're working with is kind of not ideal or flawed or has just kind of outgrown
Gone off the rails a little bit. Yeah.
But it's still kind of up to the individuals to be more like how we use it and how we bring people into it. And I like what you said, Dylan, about, like ultimately it is also on the player, the person to, things shouldn't just be handed to you. There is a bit of onus on you to do some research and learn like, hey, what, I keep hearing people say Metroidvania. What is that? Let me figure that. Oh, I like those games.
Yeah.
Let me check that out. So
yeah. It's similar to like if somebody's like, I like action movies. Like that's completely meaningless. That has like
that's Bullet Train.
What kind? It's like you literally. Oh, well, I literally only watch Marvel movies. Oh, okay. So you like Marvel movies, like.
You like action,
you like the
comedies.
superhero type of movies. It's like that is way more useful than action movies,
right?
Yeah, so
for sure. Yeah, I think it's been a good conversation. Appreciate you guys allowing me to vent a little bit and dissect this topic and discuss it. But in a strange and bizarre turn of events, we actually have a game for this episode, a closing trivia game that Aubrey has prepared for us. So
we do.
Let's go ahead and round out the topic portion of this episode and move into our closing segment. So, Aubrey, you prepped a game for us, and
I did.
I'm excited to see what we got going here.
So now that we've had a very lovely discussion about how, specificity is important and, that the language is probably ultimately fine, it's just how you use it and all that. Y'all are going to try and guess games based off of the tags in Steam.
Cool.
Ugh, that's gonna be tough. It's gonna be
Everything's
so
going to be
brutal.
labeled as a Souls-like.
Yeah, it's gonna be like action
Yeah.
game.
Well,
So,
speaking of,
yeah.
I forgot
action
to bring it up.
RPG.
Do you think so? Like, there's there's a YouTuber called Iron Pineapple, and
Yes.
his whole shtick is he plays Souls-like games
So that you don't have to.
so that you don't have to. And I wonder how many people are in his comments being like, actually, this is not a Souls-like game, because some of the stuff is just labeled as a Souls-like game, and it is not. So
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, once you get like enough like viewers, that type of stuff tends to
Yeah.
get buried, which
well, and
we're
some
not
of,
there yet.
yeah, some of his stuff is just like, well, it has rolling, so Souls-like.
Well, and like I was about to
Legend of
say,
Zelda.
well, maybe he like at the beginning of videos like explains clearly like, hey, so the way I defined the criteria for this experiment is that I'm going to go into Steam and I'm going to search by the tag Souls-like, and whatever comes up, that's fair game. And then, you know, that negates some of those comments. But I know from experience that it seems like some people just comment, they like launch the video, pause the video, and then comment without
Yeah.
listening to anything you said in the video, because what they said was very blatantly and explicitly addressed in the
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
So yeah, who knows what he has to
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah, there was definitely like I watched like this YouTube video. It was maybe like 20 minutes, and it was about something that was like like some weird thing that went like an unsolved mystery in World of Warcraft. And like if you watch the entire video, at the end he's like, I made all of this up. None of this is real. And then you will see like all of the people who clearly didn't watch to the end commenting
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I'm going to go try this. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so to help you guys kind of get into the headspace of like where I was at when I was picking games, there's 13 games that I've chosen here. And at first it was just ones I could pull off the top of my head.
That's
and then
helpful.
once I like defined it, because initially I was looking at like Wikipedia for how it was defined there. And then I was like, okay, well, Wikipedia is giving me 2-word descriptions. Okay, so maybe I'll pull quotes from Wikipedia. This is annoying and taking too long. Okay, maybe OpenCritic. No, OpenCritic, unhelpful. So then I launched Steam and was like looking for game descriptions in there, and then they had the very helpful tag. So partway through, I did kind of switch to
Oh, interesting.
recently played or whatever, and then was kind of like digging around in genres. So I did try and be conscious of what I think you guys have some experience with.
okay.
So best of luck to you.
Yeah,
Y'all
very,
ready?
very
Yep.
curious to see how this goes.
Okay.
Are we shouting out our answers?
I
Alternating?
think so, because there's like 10 tags per
Mm.
game. So I think
Okay.
if we go by each and you get a guess by each, it's going to take way too long. So
Yeah.
I'll
So
just
shout it out.
slowly name the tags and you can throw them out there.
Guess when we have a
Okay.
guess. Okay.
So the first one is open world, action,
Skyrim.
fantasy. What'd you say?
Skyrim.
No. Damn. Third person, stealth, single player.
Assassin's Creed 2.
No. RPG, action RPG, assassin. And I didn't do like multiple ones from the same genre. So you can like mentally take all of the Assassin's Creed games out of your brain.
Okay.
Hack and slash, gore, parkour, atmospheric.
Taking Assassin's Creed out of my brain has kind of hurt me.
One of them was open world, wasn't it?
Yes, the first one.
Okay, so it's not Hellblade.
Correct. Story
Oh.
rich.
Baldur's Gate 3.
No.
Damn.
Dark fantasy. Magic.
The stealth
Is
is
this a
throwing me
Dragon
off.
Age game?
It is not a Dragon Age game. Lore rich. Based on a novel. Sandbox.
Based on a novel.
Based on a novel? Shadow of Mordor.
Yes.
Ah.
I was like, you can do stealth in those games. Yeah.
I tried to make sure
Woo.
as I was putting them in, there's like at least one tag that's like seems to like
Yeah.
really
give it
shove
away.
you in the direction of the
I
proper
don't
game.
know that any of those shoved me, but I was like,
Yeah.
that game played a lot like an Assassin's Creed, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one for Andrew, and Dylan is keeping score. Wonderful. All right, the next one. Survival horror.
Left 4 Dead.
No.
Resident Evil.
Yes.
What were some of the other tags?
Horror,
Big lady.
first person, single player, sexual content, action, zombies, gore, story rich, first person shooter,
Story rich is generous.
atmospheric, violent, dark, survival, psychological horror, adventure, VR, open world, multiplayer, and nudity.
No puzzle in there, huh?
No puzzle.
Even though from what I've watched, 50% of Resident Evil games are like finding a thing and making its shadow shaped like an eagle.
That was specifically Village.
Also 7.
7 did have some puzzly stuff, but not. I don't feel like it nearly as much as Village or like especially Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 did have, in my opinion.
The old games are very, that is the thing.
That,
is like find
like
the
Resident
thing,
Evil
do
4.
the puzzle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pick up the thing, put it in the place.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. Fighting.
Soul Calibur 2. Or Soul
No.
Calibur.
Super
Just in
Smash
general.
Brothers.
Action.
Oh, wait. Super Smash Brothers isn't on Steam. Never mind.
No. That is another thing to think about. Superhero.
Injustice.
Yeah.
I was like, if it's not Soul Calibur, what other fighting game would Aubrey bring up?
What I think of,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So other ones that might have given it away are comic book. Story rich is hilarious. Beat 'em up.
That's not really that hilarious. The story in the Injustice games, they probably have some
It
of
is
the
pretty
better.
good.
Like people praise Mortal Kombat for those stories too, and it's the same developer, but
Same kind of a thing. Yeah. Competitive, violent, 2.5D, sexual content. Oh, and great soundtrack was a tag.
interesting.
Interesting.
No Ninja Turtles soundtrack or Ninja Turtles tag, huh?
No.
You can play as them in the second one. It's kind of disturbing because they look so like realistic.
I think I did play as Raphael in Injustice 2 one time when we played.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. Choices matter.
Life is
Horror.
Strange.
Horror.
Night in the Woods.
No. Multiple endings.
The Quarry.
Yeah.
Damn.
Suck it, Dylan.
Other obvious ones would be QuickTime events,
Brenda Song.
nudity, permadeath, psychological horror, stuff like that.
We didn't get that scene.
The nudity or the permadeath?
Well, we did get permadeath.
We got the permadeath.
We did get that one. So,
I was going to say, I don't really remember. I mean, they went swimming, they went skinny dipping, but I don't feel like we saw anything
yeah.
exciting.
Okay, next game. Open world. Story rich.
How many of these have had
Sure.
open world as a tag? It's crazy.
The Witcher.
No. Western.
Red Dead
Red Dead
Redemption.
Adventure. Yeah.
Who did you hear
This is
first?
another one. I heard Andrew first. This is another one that got the great soundtrack tag.
Is it 2 or 1 that you were looking up?
2.
Yeah, 2 has a really good soundtrack.
It also specifically had the tag of horses.
Yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
Rockstar for their their advertising leading up to the game was talking about the horse testicle physics. So
Yuck.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. Multiplayer. Online co-op.
What?
Local co-op.
Okay.
Co-op.
Baldur's Gate 3.
No. Casual.
Overcooked.
Yes.
Wow.
It also had funny, cooking, 4-player local, indie, local multiplayer again,
That was a shot
action
in the dark on that
family
one.
friendly.
It's
One
not
that-
family friendly. That is not a family friendly
No,
game.
it tears families apart.
Cute, colorful. One, and I realized because I was doing it on Steam, it did have the tag controller. So I think it's one that you don't have to,
Yeah, you
I
can
don't know.
use a
Like some
controller.
of these, you can definitely use a controller for like Red Dead Redemption, but
Yeah.
I don't know why that was a specific tag. All right. Andrew's running away with this. Come on,
Yes.
Dylan.
I'm trying.
All right. Dark fantasy.
Witcher.
Open world.
I just want to get that one before
I
he
was gonna say
does.
Dylan's thinking about like games I like. He needs to be thinking about games you like.
RPG.
Baldur's Gate 3.
No. Difficult.
Dark Souls.
Souls-like. No, it's not Dark Souls. It's a Souls-like. It's not Dark
Elden
Souls. Dark
Ring.
Souls can't be a Souls-like. It is Elden Ring.
Who said that first? I feel like on my end we said it at the
I-
same time.
I heard Dylan start to say it before I heard you
Okay.
say it. but I was talking over him when he was
Too
saying it.
bad we couldn't have said Bloodborne because it hasn't been released on PC.
Elden Ring also got the great soundtrack tag.
That's true.
And the family-friendly tag.
It's
It's
not.
like there's not gore language.
There's gore. There's quite a bit
That's
of gore.
I
there's-
don't think of gore anymore.
there isn't language and there isn't like the violence itself. Like the fighting itself, you're not like cutting body parts off, really.
No, but like
It's
you
not
have
like Hellblade 2.
you have like Godric the Grafted,
Yeah.
who
He does rip his arm off.
yeah, like rips his own arm off, and also it just has
And they're kinda
other people's
spooky.
grafted body parts attached to him and things. Yeah,
Alrighty, next one. We're 7 down, 6 to go. RPG. Choices matter.
The Witcher 3.
This is Baldur's Gate.
I was hoping to
Character
snipe that one from
customization.
Dylan. He keeps saying it.
Yep. CRPG, romance, sexual content, class-based. I put turn-based combat like kind of halfway down the list in case we didn't get to it. Like that was going to be the second biggest get it away, and then the real giveaway would have been the tag Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty obvious at that point.
Baldur's Gate 2?
Alrighty. Next one. Horror. Online co-op.
Phasmophobia.
Yep. Dark Demons Detective. Early access.
I can't believe how quickly I'm getting some of these. Like the last time I said Phasmophobia was probably 2021.
You're digging deep in your brain. Like, what would Aubrey
I'm like,
gravitate
what does
towards on like
on-
the
yeah.
mostly played?
Especially on Steam. Like what?
Mm-hmm.
It's hilarious.
Alrighty. Next one. Adventure.
Tomb Raider.
Wait,
No.
Wingspan.
Detective.
Wingspan.
Wingspan. You know, I thought about putting that in there. I really did.
Adventure.
All right. Detective. Story rich.
Is this one of
Episodic.
your search and find games that we're not going to know the title of?
No. Why
Okay.
would I put that in there? I'm
I
not
don't
playing
know,
Stump
you're
the
trying to
Band
trick
here.
us.
Choose your own adventure. Point and click.
Wolf Among Us.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew has one.
I was trying to think like it sounded Telltale-ish, and I
Yeah.
don't
Mhm.
know. Have you actually played Wolf Among Us?
No.
Like I know I've
But
told you to
there's-
play Wolf Among Us. I've told you to play the Batman ones, and I doubt you.
That's
had
the one
played
I was
Walking
about
Dead.
to guess was the Batman one.
Yeah. No, there's some sort of like DLC or promotional something for Borderlands that was up there. And I was like, oh yeah, Telltale. Wolf Among Us.
Yeah, you specifically should play the Wolf Among Us and the Batman. The Batman ones are really good. You should definitely play those. And then Walking Dead, especially season 1, is excellent, but like Wolf Among Us and Batman just have like very strong story/genre ties that you would appreciate.
Mhm. Yeah. I know. It's just that like something about getting it started.
It's also an easy 1,000 gamer score if you do it on Xbox.
I was gonna say it's the best part is like it is episodic, so you can kind of just sit down and be like, I will play for an hour and a half, and that is one episode, you know.
yeah.
But I will say
So-
for Wolf Among Us and Batman both, like once I started, I didn't want to stop
yeah,
either of them.
for sure. Yeah. All right. We have 3 more if we're having fun.
I'm having
I mean,
a blast.
Might as well finish it out. So,
All right. Exploration.
The Witcher 3.
No. Sandbox. Driving.
Open roads.
No.
Mad Max.
That was not the case for open roads either.
Okay, I don't know.
It's not
Pacific
Mad Max.
Drive.
He didn't listen to our episode.
I guess not.
I
Action
did, sort of.
adventure. Character customization.
Days Gone.
No. 3D.
That's helpful.
Cute. Open world. Family friendly. Action. Dog.
The Last of Us.
No. Cute.
Dog.
Adventure.
Fable 3.
No. Cartoon.
That's not driving.
Dog.
Co-op.
Paw Patrol.
Yes. This Paw Patrol world.
Wow.
They have one where I guess you can make your own little Paw Patrol dog or whatever and drive around in a little Tonka truck looking.
I think that might be the like most recent one. I was trying to think of games that like you would have played. I'm like Fallout 4 dog family friendly. What is
Right.
Yeah,
I think the tags are user submitted, so
Yep. All right. Next one. Action roguelike.
Hades.
I heard Andrew first. What's great about this was the very next tag was roguelite.
Oh.
The first one was roguelike, and then it was action roguelike, then roguelite, and then later down was the tag roguelike.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like someone in the comments is going to be pedantic and be like, actually, Hades is a roguelite because roguelikes don't actually blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, they don't let you like carry over progression from run to run or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep. Also got the great soundtrack tag, which we all know. Mythology was a tag. Replay value. Hand-drawn. And permadeath, which feels completely incorrect.
Right?
Like, I guess you die in a run, the run is over, but the whole point is you keep coming back.
We also have death defiances. I don't know.
Yeah.
You couldn't tell you. Alrighty, last one. Puzzle.
Portal 2.
No. Relaxing.
Spiritfarer.
No. Wholesome. Casual.
Slime Rancher.
Bejeweled.
Not Slime Rancher. What'd you say, Dylan?
Bejeweled.
No. Though that is on Game Pass and I did play it on my Xbox. Cats.
Stray?
No.
We both said that like a question.
Colorful.
A little to
Logic.
the left.
It is a little to the left.
Oh, I would never have gotten that.
Yep. Maybe like hand-drawn, 2D.
Honestly, I have
objects.
no idea what a little to the
Organizational.
left looks like.
Yeah, point and click. I did think about, it's called like Little Cat Big World or something, which is like the one all the people who were into Stray are all into now. And I thought about throwing that one on there, but I didn't know if you guys like ran in the circles that would have.
No, neither of us is cat people. So
That was a good game. I like that that formula. It's a good structure that we could maybe expand on for future games.
And kind of like a proof of concept for like, is our current language for defining games sufficient in defining a game? Like, could you guess it based on the tags?
No, I won because I know you. Not that Dylan doesn't know you, but I do have an advantage.
yeah, I was going to say, you've got at least a few years there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for hosting that, Aubrey. That was a ton of fun.
Sure thing.
Let's move into housekeeping. Dylan, what's going on YouTube?
All right. So on YouTube, we do have some videos up there. If you haven't watched Andrew talk about Mortal Shell, if you do like Souls-like games, maybe check that out. And then I also put up a review / kind of what is this game on a game called Tribes of Midgard, which is a roguelite survival type of game. So
I don't know what that
tie
means.
it to these
Explain that to
genres.
me.
Exactly. So if you're interested, go watch that video. But both those we were kind of experimenting a little bit with a newer format of some of those videos. So check those out if you haven't. Maybe leave us some comments. Let us know if you like them or not. And then we will have a little bit in the future coming up here, a update to the Fantasy Critic League. So keep an eye out for that because that will be coming up. But also, we do have a YouTube channel. If you listen to this podcast and you're not following us on YouTube, even if you don't watch YouTube, be cool if you could just subscribe. Do us a little favor.
I almost exclusively listen to this podcast on YouTube.
You and like 50 other people every week, and I'm always shocked that people listen to podcasts on YouTube.
It is interesting because I feel like as the YouTube numbers have gone up a little bit, the like podcast numbers have gone down a little bit. So it's like some people they just go to YouTube. They just like YouTube.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine, I guess when I think of people listening to the podcast on YouTube, I'm thinking of them like just playing it in their phone like you would on Spotify or Apple, and not the like sitting down with a second screen or something like that,
Right.
with the video just kind of in the background, which is I assume how most people are actually engaging with it on YouTube, and not how I think of it.
I mean, I do it exactly how you think of it. I pop an earbud in and listen to it as I like get ready and drive to work and all that stuff. Like it's literally just another audio platform for me.
If you pay for YouTube Premium,
but Spotify exists.
you can listen to stuff with the app closed, so it does still kind of function like a listening
that's
app.
when I do have YouTube Premium. So.
Yeah. And so if, especially these people that are listening to our podcast with YouTube Premium, if you're not subscribed, subscribe so that we can get to 1,000 subscribers and we can get some of that YouTube Premium money. Thank you.
Right.
So
let's see, on the
I'm over here doing my part.
on the podcast side of things, the Fantasy Critic update that Dylan mentioned, that will also be a podcast episode coming up next week. That will be our next upcoming episode. We got the whole league back together to check in and talk about how things are going. Mistakes have been made, minor victories, how we see the rest of the year going, things like that. It was a lot of fun to record. So it's in the editing booth right now, and it will be our next episode coming out. Aubrey, what would you recommend? Say this is somebody's first podcast episode. What would you recommend they go back and listen to in our backlog?
I really like our music episode and was just thinking we should do another one.
Yeah.
That was really fun because you got to interact with, all our personalities, and also you get to listen to really cool music and, kind of get introduced to a lot of different games and genres.
That's a good one.
The 50 questions one was really fun.
Talking about the music one, because at this point there's probably new music that at least some of us have heard of or listened to or appreciated, and also it is just kind of fun to just share. No future spoilers, but I played enough of Night in the Woods as was my homework, and I heard the song in that game that Aubrey brought up in one of our previous music episodes, and I was like, oh, I've heard this before. This is like there's a connection to this song already, so
there's some context.
It is cool to kind of like just share the music that is kind of like stuck with us from some of our games that maybe the other people wouldn't necessarily play the game, but might appreciate the music.
Yeah. I mean, video games are such a multimedia experience that it's cool to shout out specific things like that. We gotta
do another one of those so that people can bring up House of Hope from Baldur's Gate 3.
Right. And then any interview where you guys interviewed a lady. I really enjoy all of those.
It's kind of sexist.
I like a little bit, but I like, you ask very sensible questions and you engage with them in their hobbies as they are. And, speaking as a female viewer / listener, it is nice to see a real conversation happening. When women are invited on podcasts, especially a lot of the big ones, sometimes it's a really stupid conversation. So you guys do a really good job with it.
Oh, you play video games? Name every Call of Duty.
I played Tomb Raider once. She's a woman, right?
If you're going to be looking at a butt the whole time, it may as well be a girl's butt.
I can't really argue with that, but I do appreciate the kind words. Yes, it's the I'm proud of all of our interviews, obviously, but I do like that you calling those out. That's very it's good to get that feedback. And we do have more interviews penciled in on our schedule. We'll see how things shake out in the future, but that is definitely something we are still moving forward with and trucking along with in the future.
And if you do something interesting or cool in video games and happen to be listening to this podcast and are like, I think it would be cool if I was interviewed, shoot us an email to Andrew. Say our email address.
Yeah, neighborhoodgamerspod@gmail.com. You can also, we have a form on our website. You can also reach out on Instagram or X, or you can join our Discord and shoot me a private message or whatever. Like any of our
This isn't
channels.
A guarantee that we're going to interview you, but
but yeah,
if you happen to be like a game developer or something that happens to listen to this podcast, shoot us. Like, we're happy to have you on.
Yes, and any of our any of our channels. I would say that our like form on the website I check the least, so maybe try a different channel first. But yeah, I check them all pretty regularly. So yeah, if you're interested in coming on the show, yeah, for sure, shoot us a message. We're pretty down to earth.
Game specific is cool, but also if you do anything creative in the nerdy space, like
Exactly.
Yeah, if you make those anime body pillows, like we would love to talk to you about why you do that. Especially Dylan. He's being very quiet for some reason.
What a weirdly specific.
Yeah.
You're not curious at all?
It's shock, really.
You're not curious at all?
Well, the way that you were like, why you do that? It's just like,
yeah, I mean,
not how you do that. Tell us about the process. How'd you get into this?
I'm sure they do it for
it's
a
like,
paycheck.
Why?
What led you here?
It's like, well, you see, the same reason you used to make dentures, I make body pillows. Like, I just have to provide for my family. Anyways, Aubrey, do you have anything you want to plug or shout out outside of this content?
Look closely at what your Medicare supplement plan provides.
Okay, I'll cut all this out.
Nah. Not really, no. I'm doing lots of life stuff right now, so not a lot of creative stuff that needs eyes on it at the moment.
Cool. Well, then hopefully you all have enjoyed this conversation, this kind of broader topic episode. If you have, we would really appreciate you letting us know, like Dylan said, in a YouTube comment or on a podcast platform that you listen to. Leave a rating, leave a review. Those things help us a ton. Outside of that, thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers podcast. If so, we would greatly appreciate your help in growing the show and the community by giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcasting app that allows it.
We also have some great videos on our YouTube channel, including reviews, rankings, and other topics. We would really appreciate you checking it out. And if you want to keep up with everything going on in the neighborhood, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to jump in our Discord server.
We hope to see you there. Links for everything are in the podcast description. Thanks again for listening, and remember,
Stay friendly, gamers.